Welcome to take part in another day. Yet another day is occurring, and for the first time in quite a while I am again out walking in the woods. This time with a hope that there might be a series of walks now as the winter begins subsiding into the spring of the year 2019. And it might be a good occasion to return once again back to some of the dear old themes, the general themes of existence, as it can be considered from the personal experience point of view, based on the impressions received, based on the total impression of all the impressions and how it has developed over time. At the same time as these talks are good for exploring themes of more general interest, with a lot of free-flowing possibility within them, it can be nice to begin off with some kind of structure or some kind of a question to use as a point of departure, especially if one has a question or a field of inquiry, or we could also call it a theme, which seems to make some sense and is related to many of the other questions of most interest to me nowadays. And as I began this walk, it came to me that today I think I have one such topic up my sleeve, which could be a good point of departure. And that topic is one which is increasingly dear to my heart. Appreciation. The attitude of appreciation, the approach of appreciation in regards to what is real. So what is real is a very big theme. And maybe it's a theme that's worth going into at the beginning of an appreciative inquiry. What it is that to me seems to be completely real and true. If there are some insights that generally seem to be unshakable, that I can really stand behind and put my name on, somewhere that feels more solid, And this is, of course, where again I return to the personal experience, the experience through the senses, the immediate experience, and also the vivid memories which are being evoked and mixed together with the immediate experience. With all that being said, I think that in many of these previous videos I have elaborated rather thoroughly on this question of what is real and what is it we know to be real and know to be true, and what is it that seems clearly from my point of view to be true. And to make the long story short, this inquiry line has brought me personally to this idea of patterns of movement in space, where it has become clear to me that just about everything that I perceive as real and everything I perceive as meaningful seems to be related to movement and the kind of movement which is taking place in space, the space where I exist. Just the space in general. So today it could be good, building on this idea and all of the things that have happened previously, to see if I can go a little more into the specifics of the appreciative inquiry as I understand it. Because of course appreciative inquiry is for some people a buzzword already, and it has many kinds of meaning, and there's a general theme running through it, and I feel very sure there are written many books about it that I've never even heard about. I would be surprised if that was not the case. So when I'm talking about appreciative inquiry here, I have to obviously find my own approach to it, and maybe begin by saying what I think of as appreciative inquiry and why this idea interests me so much. And then if that's made clear, then maybe you can know more about whether you relate to it, and if you already have an interest in appreciation, whether what kind of resonance you might have. Between that and the ideas that I'm going to share. So this was a bit of a introduction which lasted 10 minutes, but with these kind of walk and talks I generally tend to not rush it. I think this first one, I think it's gonna be a long one. I think I'll go for a long one now. A long one take. Let it be what it'll be. But since I'm 10 minutes into it already, I think that it's time to get the steam up and begin going really into the heart of the issue. Appreciation. Why is appreciation such a fascinating idea? Why does it interest me so much? Why does it seem so relevant to the current situation in the world and in society? Why is it that appreciation even seems to be a new paradigm of scientific inquiry where the typical empirical sciences become coupled with the visionary engineering sciences, which try to create new technologies to assist our common good. And the kind of appreciation that I'm so fascinated with is in this direction. It is, as mentioned, based on raw reality, exactly the way reality actually is. With that is then included the informational gap between how I perceive reality and the reality beyond anything I can perceive. And in the perspective that I'm using here, my own perspective on reality is considered a part of reality, in the sense of a real world event which is happening with me while I'm going here and considering the question about what reality is. This also means that the inquiry itself is changing reality somewhat. Doesn't change everything, that's for sure, because reality is very big. But it does change something. And this also relates to the appreciative inquiry. If I choose to inquire into all kinds of phenomena with an attitude of appreciation, there is along with this a hope that this might become, at some stage in the process, a self-fulfilling prophecy. In that, by having the approach of appreciation, the attitude of appreciation, the expectation of appreciation, I might then increase my chance of actually finding something which is worth appreciating. So that when finding something which is worth appreciating and calling attention towards that, and calling attention towards the ways in which that can be appreciated, this in itself could make a difference. This in itself could create a new field of potential in the world. A new kind of an energy, you might say. At the very least, a perspective which finds something valuable. So I'm now going to approach this from the point of view of value. How am I currently defining value? I was thinking about this issue yesterday, and suddenly there came to me this beautiful definition of value. It just suddenly landed in my mind, and it was a typical example of the kind of definition which I really love and which is so in line with my general way of thinking. The definition of value was that value is something which is actually experienced as valuable. And if we speak about human values is, according to this point of view, that which human beings value, which they actually value, which actually is together with an experience of this being valuable. So a very, very simple definition. It's a somewhat, you could say, circular definition. But as mentioned, since I'm now using this approach, which aims to influence the event space itself in a beneficial way, this is the kind of circular thinking which aims towards becoming a spiral. And becoming a spiral staircase leading towards better and better things. Discovering ever new hidden potential in reality. So what is the relationship between value, appreciation, and reality? As mentioned, reality is here considered as the total field of everything which exists at every place and every scale and in every way, within which this inquiry is happening. So reality is the space around this question about what reality is. As mentioned, the appreciative inquiry is looking into some kind of real life phenomenon in a way which is seeking to find something valuable. It is expecting to find something valuable. So this then will mean that when I'm looking into reality, when I'm studying the real world, one of the main insights that I've reached is the vastness of the real world. The complexity, the richness, the magnitude. Seeing that and then approaching it with the attitude of appreciation, I then expect, due to the vastness of reality, that there is a lot of value at any place. Which means, according to the definitions already established, that there's a lot of potential to discover something which at some point will be experienced as valuable. Something that will be experienced as beneficial, as a good thing. And since I'm a human being, specifically we can see then 4 human beings. So I think I've been pretty precise now in establishing a few of the frames of reference, so to say, and defining how I'm using the core concepts here. I've seen some academics love this game of defining how they're using concepts, and I've noticed that I also tend to want to do this. Whether it's the ultimate approach or not is hard to say. But it does seem to have its charm, and it does seem to have its potential value. Because at very least, if you have a very different understanding of what appreciation means, of what value means, of what reality means, then at the very least, you will now know that I'm now using these kinds of ways of interpreting it. So then maybe if something else I say sounds strange, you could go back and compare it with the mentioned definitions and then see if it makes more sense. It's always good to have as much clarity as possible. Preciseness of speech seems to be a major asset, seems to be a major value, you could say. Now let's continue going into it. I have also mentioned potential. The way of thinking about this is pretty simple. At any place you are, there's very much happening. There's very much happening around you. There's a lot of life, there's a lot of existence, there's a lot of reality. And when then looking into the future, there seems to be a lot of potential. So in every situation, there are opportunities. Even in situations where something really is experienced as disastrous happens, even in such situations, there will often be a possibility of learning something very valuable, something very useful, something that makes you wiser and might even give you lessons that can help you later. Come to icy waters. That ice does not seem like something that one can walk safely on at the moment due to the recent mild weather. So now I'm just gonna shift context a little bit and try to use some specific real-world examples. Of course, now I'm walking here in the forest. A lot of the time in the current situation, modern society, you could say, people spend time looking at machines, computers, various devices. You've probably heard about them. And if you are hearing these words, then you are in all likelihood doing it by looking at such a device. What else are we looking at on these devices? Well, we're looking at patterns of pixels on the screens. Then the patterns give shapes which become letters and words and sentences, and sometimes these are associated with names, which are also sentences which codify a certain person. And then you are informed that a message comes from a certain person, and suddenly it's a statement from a person that you read. It can be an update on a social media platform. It can be a response to something you've written or someone else has written. It can be a video. It can be something you read in the media where a person is quoted. But you read something which has been said by someone. Now, this is the moment. How are you going to approach that? So let's build a little on what was mentioned. Reality, it's real, you're looking at the screen, you're seeing the message, that's real. Is it real that the person actually said it? Probably it is, especially in certain places like Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, where they write their own post. That is probably exactly what they wrote. If they're being quoted, then that is probably a part of what they said in a given situation. What else is real? As you consider it more, you soon discover there's a whole event around which this was written. There was a preceding context before it. There were certain intentions and interests which the person making the statement was occupied with at the given moment. So there were all kinds of things. There is the worldview of the person, there's the temperament of the person, there's the economic situation of the person, there's the person's perception of others' perception of that person, and how to maneuver this field. And all of these things, which are so typical of normal social life. And as a result of all of this, you suddenly see a statement by another person. This is an example of a situation where the appreciative approach can be very clearly exemplified. If I read something that someone else has said on the internet, and I now take in that impression with an approach of appreciation, I can now simply accept that concerning all of the background for the statement, I don't really know those things. I simply haven't had time or opportunity to learn enough about it. So I can then already notice that concerning what that person truly means with the statement, I really can't say that for sure. And the impression that I'm getting from that statement is almost certainly somewhat different from how that person themselves view it. And going further, I also notice that's probably the same situation as all other people reading it. And even further, that's probably the situation for all people reading all kinds of statements by all kinds of people on social media. So, I've discovered that this is a typical scenario that has a lot of application. It's many different kinds of scenarios. This scenario happens very often. It's a very typical kind of a situation. To read a statement on social media by someone you don't really know, and you may get a certain impression of what it means, but concerning what it really means, there's almost all the true information about it is hidden from you. Okay. Moving onward again, with the appreciative approach. How do I deal with such a situation? Well, the approach I then take is I choose to interpret the statement in the most meaningful way I can. This also means that I can interpret the statement in many different ways, if I find many meaningful ways to interpret it. But I'm looking for all the ways in which that statement is maximally meaningful, is maximally valuable, relevant, true, and worthwhile, we could say. This again leads me to potential. What is the potential of this statement? I notice that it is an informational pattern that evokes a psychological response. I also notice something about my own immediate psychological response. Can this teach me something about the typical responses people have to statements in social media? But not only that, could there be a situation where this statement would be spot on? And not only that, could I imagine this statement being somewhat modified, somewhat expanded, or somewhat simplified in a way which would make the statement even more meaningful, beneficial, and valuable? And maybe then in a given kind of situation. So by looking at the statement through these eyes, I noticed that I'm in a position where I do not need to make assumptions about what the statement means in itself, if that's even something that makes sense to say. Rather, it is an inquiry into everything the statement could mean. Well, of course not everything it could mean, because it could mean an infinite number of things. But it's an inquiry into what the statement could mean if the statement is considered in the most meaningful way, in the most valuable and beneficial way. What is it this statement could beneficially mean? What could it valuably mean? What could this statement mean which would make me really appreciate it, find it illuminating, find it inspiring, find it as a seed of something good that is growing and moving inside of me, that's being stimulated and brought forth? Is it possible for me to find an interpretation of this statement which will transform this statement into a gift? Maybe even a treasure. Or, at the very least, the beginning of a treasure. This seems to be the essence of the appreciative approach that I've mentioned. Based on reality, beginning with the fact that I noticed something is really perceived. For example, a statement by another person. Also, I notice most of the backdrop behind it is hidden from me, and there's a lot I don't know about how that person perceives that statement to be meant and why the person makes the statement. And still, I can approach the statement with an approach which seeks the maximum value from the statement, from the phenomena, from the experience. And this value can then extend into the field of potential, which means that I can then, through the appreciative approach, use each experience as a stimulant towards an inquiry into the most beautiful field of potential, which this experience could be a doorway into.